Alright, after years of being looked at as the most overrated fighter on the roster, Sean O'Malley finally realized his dream of holding UFC gold. And he did it in true Sean O'Malley fashion, getting the TKO stoppage led by his now infamous right hand. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Suga Show. For most of his career, the big knock on Sean O'Malley was the lack of big names on his record. And for good reason, because up until about a year or so ago, every single person that he had fought and beaten was no longer even on the UFC roster. Then came the Petr Yan fight, where Sean went from essentially unranked to fighting the #1 contender in the world. A lot of people thought the fight against Petr Yan was going to be when Sean finally got exposed as not a real contender. But instead, he got his hand raised in a somewhat controversial split decision. But whether you think Sean won the fight against Petr Yan or not, you'd still have to admit that in that fight, he proved that he can hang with the top guys. Fast forward to UFC 292, where Sean finally got his title shot against, on paper, maybe the worst matchup in the bantamweight division for Sean, in the guy with some of the best jiu-jitsu in the bantamweight division and with some of the best back control in the UFC as a whole. Many people, and I have to admit, myself included, thought this might be the one where the Sean O'Malley hype train finally gets derailed. But the guy is a bona fide superstar, and he finished the fight in true superstar fashion. Now, there was a little bit of controversy in the stoppage itself, and I have to say that stoppage was a little early for my liking, but I've seen better and I've seen worse. But I do wonder, had that been someone other than Aljamain Sterling, had that been a Conor McGregor, for example, if they would have stopped the fight just as early. And that brings me to my next point. As awesome as it is to see Sean finally reach champion status, it's equally as heartbreaking to see Aljamain Sterling go out like that. Sean O'Malley said himself in the lead up to this fight that Aljamain Sterling, with the run that he's been able to put together, is maybe the greatest bantamweight fighter of all time. Yet the guy never got the respect that he deserved. And I get that partially where it comes from is that DQ win over Petr Yan that won Aljamain the belt in the first place. But at the end of the day, you can't fault Aljamain since he's not the one who made that rule in the first place. And if you look at some of the names on Aljamain's 9-fight winning streak, it's a murderer's row of all the best guys at 135. From his submission victory over Corey Sandhagen, his TKO stoppage over TJ Dillashaw, though that had some controversy too, his fully legitimate victory over Yan in the rematch where he solidified himself as the champion, and of course his decision win over Henry Cejudo where he was able to take him down 4 times despite Henry Cejudo being an Olympic gold medalist wrestler. The sad part is, with this loss, I think a lot of people are going to end up glossing over all of the achievements that Aljamain's been able to pile up over his career, especially since a lot of the fans of Sean O'Malley are more casual UFC fans. I imagine a lot of them are bigger fans of Sean O'Malley than the UFC. So for a lot of people like that, their memory of Aljo is going to be him being the guy that got knocked out the night that Sean O'Malley won the belt, when in reality, Aljo was a completely legitimate champion, a dominant champion, and on top of that, one of the nicest guys in the UFC. So it's next. Part of the reason that Sean O'Malley got the kind of treatment he did from the UFC was because he's so marketable. And I don't think the UFC wants to mess that up at all, at least not anytime soon, since it is a business at the end of the day. Both Merab and Corey Sandhagen deserve a title shot in their next fight, but with Corey Sandhagen's injury, he's going to be out another 4 or 5 months, and Merab might be just about ready to go, but if the same Merab that fought Petr Yan shows up in a fight against O'Malley, I don't think there's anybody at 135 that's going to beat him. So obvious next move is Cheeto. Sean and Cheeto already have that built-in backstory with the controversial TKO victory that Cheeto has over O'Malley, and I'm sure Sean O'Malley wants to get that fight back, especially with the added pressure of it being a title fight. This is realistically probably the biggest fight that can happen for Sean O'Malley in the entirety of the bantamweight division. And on top of that, at least if you're judging off both of these guys' most recent performances, I think this is a very winnable fight for Sean O'Malley, especially in comparison to the other options there are for him to fight. I think Suga Sean O'Malley and Marlon Cheeto Vera are on a collision course for a fight that is going to have insane hype, and I just can't wait. Thanks for watching.